Well, after high school, I became a student at Colgate University. And I completed 3.5 years, and the war came on. I was a class of 42. And while in Lauderdale, I had a call from my father. The draft board is looking for you. You better get back. So we were out of money. So what we did, this was kind of interesting. We went to a citrus orchard and talked with this gentleman who owned it, telling him about our fate, and we had to get back because we were going to be inducted into the service, you know. And so he let us pick all the fruit that we fill up the whole rear of the car, and we sold the fruit.
I'll be darned.
To buy gasoline to get back to Jamestown.
So you could be drafted.
That's right. And my first assignment was Camp Butner, North Carolina. We were the ones who I would establish the 78th Lightning Division. And I ended up on this very small troop transport. I think there were probably about 200 men and about 15 officers. And we were supposed to go to North Africa, but our orders were changed. We ended up in Panama. And we were in Panama for probably a month taking jungle training. And lo and behold, we didn't go to North Africa, we went to the South Pacific. And we ended up in New Caledonia. And I was being interviewed to be sent north to probably to one of the divisions. See, this headquarters was a split headquarters, I found out. Admiral Halsey was the Navy commander, and Lieutenant General Millard Harmon, Air Corps General. It was before the Air Force was established. He was of the Jimmy Doolittle spats type, you know.
Right.
It was a split headquarters. And from this headquarters, Guadalcanal and the other battles of the Solomons were fought. And they brought this headquarters together with a lot of college professors and highly trained people. They had no military training.
Right.
And what I did, I trained them. And I was promoted immediately to first lieutenant. Now, I was there for quite a few months. It was like living in paradise, really. Here I was probably as well trained as any young second lieutenant, you know, civilian second lieutenant. But I ended up in this very plush situation. This is interesting. When I was in New Caledonia, I had a big first sergeant. His name was, no, he wasn't the first sergeant. He was the company clerk. Zappelli was his name. And he came into my office, my orderly room, tears streaming down his face. And I said, "What's the matter?" He was a corporal. And he said, "President Roosevelt died." Of course, I was brought up in a Republican family, so that didn't break my heart, really, you know. But a lot of the soldiers felt it. Really, he was much admired. We were sent up to the Philippines, and we stopped briefly in Hollandia, New Guinea. We weren't there very long. Then we continued on to the Philippines. We went in through the Lingayen Gulf. The fighting had about finished, though, in the Philippines, and we had an encampment. They turned us kind of into military government, what we were. And so we were in the Philippines for some time, and I remember going up to Baguio, and the war ended. The atomic bombs came down. I saw Hiroshima from a distance.
Really?
I'll never forget that.
Well, explain that.
Well, just mass devastation. You couldn't believe it. And I had it was a linguist. It was a Japanese. He was my interpreter. And he took me to his village one time, and I'm telling you, we'd go up through the areas in Japan, and farmers' barns were shot full of 50 caliber machine gun. The Navy just laid off, they shot everything that moved. And landed at a place called Wakayama. It was about probably 35 miles down a little peninsula from Colby. And I was kind of the, well, we were a small company at the time. And the military government in this little town of the small city of Wakayama. And we were there. And then, of course, I had enough points to go home, but they said I was essential and I had to go on occupation duty. Of course, I hated it. My wife joined the Red Cross, and she was in Europe with the Red Cross, and she was going to return, and of course, here I was in Japan. And as I look back at it, I thought it was a marvelous experience. You couldn't believe the devastation in Japan and how they pulled out of it. We fed them. We weren't responsible for it, Raleigh, but we did feed them because they didn't have any food. And we had, under MacArthur, we had a very benevolent occupation. And that was one of the reasons that Japan today is still one of our strong allies. As much as they forced our automobile manufacturers and so forth to improve cars and everything,
Right.
they've been a staunch ally of ours. The Japanese, the little bit I know of them, have two sides. They can be very nice and very gracious, but boy, they can be arrogant and tough too.
Right.
They've mellowed though. They're not like they used to be.
How long were you in Japan?
We arrived about the same time that MacArthur did in August, and I left in March, I think.
Oh, really?
Went up to Nagoya, Seattle. The USO had a boat full of dancing girls, and the soldiers, I almost got to turn the boat over. And we went into the officers' mess, and we had a marvelous steak meal, and all of the waiters and everything were German POWs. A significant moment probably was when you discovered, one of them, that you were a soldier.
Right.
You were going into an entirely different life, you know. Instead of being a carefree college boy, you know, here you're going into a period of discipline, into an entirely different world, one that you never knew about.
Did a lot of college students have a hard time with that?
I think some did. I knew quite a few flunked out of officers' training school at Benny.
Right.
Quite a few. But anyone who went through World War II and survived it and wasn't wounded and returned, basically had a great experience. No question about it. And the thing about it was that the whole country was behind you, see? It wasn't like Vietnam where these poor kids came back, you know, to emptiness in many ways.
Right. Right.
So it was a different feeling entirely. But of course, one of my biggest challenges after being married for 3 days and being away for 30 months was to get to know my wife again.
Oh, sure.
So
Think about